What's up, everyone? Welcome back to The Lawyer You Know. And today we're doing a special live. I was just getting out of a depot when I was handed this complaint, which is obviously interesting and a topic we've been talking about a lot on this channel. And for some reason, I can hear myself in my headphones. But so when we talk about this complaint, and I'm going to need to figure this out because it's bothering me. So when we talk about this complaint, we're going to get into a lot of the facts and what is. Don't know why this is happening. All right. Hopefully everybody can hear me now. So we're going to talk through today. We're going to talk through the complaint. We're talking about the Rust case. We're talking about Alec Baldwin. He'll be mentioned a little bit in this complaint. But what's interesting about this is the timing of when it's filed, who filed it, who the defendants are, and what causes of action they're pleading against these defendants. So when we talk through complaints, especially civil complaints, lawyers and clients have decisions that they make when they're going to file a complaint, who they're going to file it against, and what causes of action. And we've talked a little bit about this in some of the Maxwell Epstein civil cases, that you file a lawsuit against everybody you believe to be liable. And when you don't file a lawsuit against somebody under a certain set of facts, you're almost waiving claiming that they are liable. Because once you sign a release, it can be included that there are other similar defendants that may have been pled. There's statute of limitations that if you sue one defendant but not another, you could run or toll the statute of limitations against them. And if it waits long enough, then you could miss your opportunity to sue anybody else because you've been suing a different defendant. So there are decisions being made, and things are made with a purpose. So when we go through the complaint today, we're going to look at all of those factors. We're going to look at why they chose these defendants to sue, if they are still potentially pointing the finger at other people besides the defendants that they're actually suing, and what causes of action they're bringing it under and why, what those causes of action bring with them. And we're talking about the armorer in the movie Rust, who is a plaintiff now in a lawsuit against an individual and a company. So the timing is interesting because this indicates to me that her lawyers don't feel that there are any legitimate criminal charges coming her way, because if there were, they now are going to have to deal with a ton of facts. They're admitting duty, and we'll explain how they define duty throughout this complaint. They're using words directly from Hannah Gutierrez Reed, who potentially could be a criminal defendant and definitely going to be a civil defendant in other cases. They're attributing facts to her. They're giving her things she has to live up to. They're giving potentially facts that if other people like law enforcement or other plaintiffs can prove are contradictory to what she testifies to or says in the future, that can be used against her, because now they're putting all these facts in black and white, and they're giving her these duties, and they're admitting this duty on her behalf because they're filing this on her behalf. So if she's admitting she has a certain duty, that is something that can absolutely be used against her in the future. So all of that is coming from this complaint. And I'll just tell you, not all complaints are 25 pages. Some are simple complaints, some are 5 pages, some are 500 pages. It all depends on exactly what you're pleading, exactly how complicated it is, and in some cases, if the media is going to be looking at it, scrutinizing it, and breaking it down. So we have a 25-page complaint. I do want to get to a lot of the facts as we read through it. So we're going to read a lot of this together. So hopefully you guys can follow with me and get your questions in, because that's my favorite part of all these lives, is to answer the questions at the end. But I am going to go through the complaint. We're going to read the facts, and we're going to read what causes of action that are being brought, because it's really important in a case like this. We already have a version of the facts from Alec Baldwin, right? We have some versions of the facts from some secondhand reports that we're getting from some other people, including the director, Souza, that was shot through law enforcement. He cooperated. But now we're actually going to get a lot of facts of what happened in this case from the point of view of Hannah Gutierrez Reed, who is the armorer and is the one that a lot of people have blamed throughout the process. And a lot of people have at least inferred that she is going to take some of the liability. So that's going to be really important as we go through this complaint, because we're getting her point of view, and it's another version of the facts. And it's really important, and it's a lot of facts that we haven't seen anywhere else. Alec Baldwin couldn't have known about a lot of these facts. That's what's interesting about it. So that's something that's going to be cool kind of as we go through. All right, so let me share the screen here so we can get to it. All right, so you all can see that now. We'll start at the top. Hannah Gutierrez Reed is the plaintiff, filed January 12th, 2022, so less than a week ago. Seth Kenny and PDQ Arm and Prop LLC are the only two defendants. No Alec Baldwin, no production, no big boss, no assistant director Halls, nobody else. Just these two entities, we'll call them a person and an entity, and they're connected. So basically, just from the jump, before we read any facts, you can tell that she is suing on her claim and cause of action is focused on the props that were given to her to use on this movie set. That is the focus at this point. She's not blaming whoever handled the gun. She's not blaming whoever shot the gun. She's not blaming who may have grabbed the gun or done something or not warned her or not mentioned something to her, which we'll get into some of the facts. They didn't necessarily keep her up to date about what was happening. She's not suing any of them. But the other very interesting thing is we have to see who the plaintiff and who the defendant is and the cause of action to see what is she actually suing for. Because just because Alec Baldwin, Assistant Director Halls, or anybody else is not a named defendant in her complaint does not mean that they are not going to be liable for the shooting. And it does not mean that she may not point the finger later at them for the actual shooting. Because what's happening to her and all the blame and problems that are happening to her, she is pointing the finger just at this defendant in this company. So it's very interesting as we kind of talk through this, all the things that are working potentially that you may think this is saying, but it's not really saying because of the parties involved. So it's a complaint for violations of New Mexico Unfair Trade Practices Act, introducing dangerous products onto a movie set, strict product liability, and false label representations. So let's get to it. I got to put my phone over there. It keeps distracting me. Okay. Plaintiff Hannah Gutierrez Reed, by and through her counsel of record, filed this complaint. The nature of the case arises out of a shooting that occurred on the Rust production set on October 21st, 2021 that killed Halyna Hutchins and wounded Joel Souza. Talks about who the plaintiff is, who the defendant is, where they reside, the defendant company, where its principal place of business it is. And then here is paragraph 5, which is important. At all relevant times, defendants, each of them, have engaged in the business of assembling, labeling, marketing, promoting, packaging, advertising, and distributing props to individuals and entities in the state of New Mexico. So that is very important because she is pointing out right in the beginning that they are experts. They know what they're doing. They should know better when providing these props. And if something goes wrong and their label is on it, it's their fault, not my fault, is what she said. Court has subject matter jurisdiction and venue is proper. We can talk about what that means in a different video if you guys are interested in. But let's get to the facts as told by Hannah Gutierrez Reed. All right. In and about August and September of 2021, on a different movie set in Texas, defendant Seth Kenney enlisted Thel Reed, Hannah's dad, to help train actors at a shooting range in the use of live rounds at a licensed range off the movie set. The training was to help actors understand the way a firearm will recoil after live fire so that they could simulate the recoil during filming. Didn't occur on set, no live rounds on set. Following that training, Seth took the ammo can and its contents with him in his van. Thel estimated that ammo can contained 200 to 300 live 45 Colt rounds, which included Starline brass reloaded live rounds. That's going to be important later. But it's interesting is throughout this complaint, we're also going to hear a lot from Thel, Hannah's dad. And it's going to be interesting because his statements are filled throughout, and he is going to be a serious player as this litigation at least goes on, maybe the litigations that deal with whether or not Hannah's liable in other lawsuits as well, but we can save those for another day. Starline Brass is a company that produces ammo brass casings that can be made into dummy blank or live ammunition by anyone with knowledge and equipment to do so. The company does not itself make live rounds. Anyone with access to the dummy rounds could convert them into live rounds with the proper reloading equipment. On October 4th, 2021, Rust Production hired Hannah Gutierrez Reed as an independent contractor for the positions of armorer and key props assistant on Rust. Wait till you hear how much she got paid for this, for both jobs. Hannah is the daughter of Thel Reed, longtime Hollywood armorer who trained Hannah. As the Rust armorer, Hannah was responsible for, and here we go. So this paragraph is admitting her duty, admitting her responsibility. I expect if I was suing her as a plaintiff's lawyer in another case, I would copy and paste this, say by her own lawyer's words, this is her duty and responsibility in the case. As Rust armorer, Hannah was responsible for maintaining and managing operations of firearm-related movie props, including the gun that fired the fatal shot. As key props assistant, which is her other job, she was also responsible for assisting with a multitude of prop duties as requested by Ms. Zachary and production. We'll hear more about Ms. Zachary later. The Rust script was a very gun-heavy Western script with guns needed on 10 of the 12 days of filming leading up to October 21st and gunfire on at least half of those shooting days, according to the call sheets. This gun-heavy script required Hannah to perform a significant amount of work each day as both armor and key props assistant. Hannah was to be paid approximately a total of $7,500 for the jobs combined. Too much or too little? You let me know. I was shocked in one way when I heard that this is what she got paid. You guys let me know whether you think this is right or too much or too little for what they described as her job. And this duty right here, responsible for maintaining and managing operation of firearm-related movie props on a Western that's a gun-heavy movie. You tell me, $7,500. Production hired Sarah Zachary, which we talked about before, as prop manager, and she was responsible for obtaining and maintaining all movie props for Rust. Production also hired Sarah's future sister-in-law, Nicole Montoya, as props assistant. Both Hannah and Sarah were 24 years old while working on Rust, and Nicole was 19. 24, and 19 are going to be heavily involved in the weapons on set. Paid $7,500. Okay. Defendant Seth Kenney was instrumental in recommending both Hannah and Sarah for hire on the Rust set. Seth Kenney is the defendant. The Rust production was a low-budget film, obviously $7,500. It had a rushed and chaotic atmosphere at times, culminating the day before the tragedy with the abrupt and unexpected resignation of members of the camera crew on October 20th. Okay, so let's pause here. Let's remember that she is not suing the production company. She's not suing Alec Baldwin. She's not suing the people in charge of this movie. Yet, if we read these facts, it seems like she's indicating that they may have some liability or they may not have done the right thing here and there. And we'll continue to see her intimate or infer that other people are liable other than the defendant that she's suing. So it's really interesting to me. All the while, the props and armor departments were expected to teach each other and do more with less. Again, that sounds negligent. The introduction of live rounds on the set, which no one anticipated, combined with the rushed and chaotic atmosphere, created a perfect storm for a safety incident. That to me at least admits partial liability on her part. Just as me as a lawyer reading this, if I was suing her, I would be so happy to have this complaint and I would use it as evidence in that case. All right, now, Rust was a Western movie whose props included pistols, rifles, dummy ammunition, and blank ammunition. So now we're going to get to some definitions of ammunition. I would be willing to bet a lot of money that we are going to have ammunition and weapons experts come and testify in this trial to these definitions, because without it, I don't think they'd be able to dig deep enough into the differences between these ammunitions without the experts we've been talking about the whole time we've been discussing this case and these issues. You need experts to explain this to a jury, to make sure that they don't just bring in whatever knowledge they have about a dummy round into the trial. So a dummy round or drill round is a round that is completely inert, i.e. contains no primer, propellant, or explosive charge, which is exactly what the gun experts we had on the channel said. And they cite some literature that can be used by experts when explaining. A blank round is a cartridge containing powder only without a bullet. At no time was live ammunition to be used during the production of Rust. Live ammunition means a cartridge consisting of a case, primer, propellant powder, and a single metallic projectile. The source of ammo and firearms. Here's where it gets interesting, at least as far as this complaint is concerned. On or about October 4th, 2021, Sarah and Hannah met with defendant Seth Kenny at PDQ Arm and Props office in Albuquerque to collect the necessary dummy and blank ammunition and firearms for Rust. The defendants Kenny and PDQ were the primary distributor of ammunition and firearms to Rust. Over the course of the Rust production, Sarah would from time to time bring other boxes labeled dummy ammunition onto the set. So, potentially pointing the finger at Sarah Zachary. She's the one that would go back and forth and get more dummy ammunition. Obviously pointing the finger at Kenny and PDQ. Defendants Kenny and his company distributed dummies in boxes with labels affixed that read dummy rounds 45 long or 45 LC. Within each box is a plastic tray of 50 cartridges packaged in 10 columns of 5 individual dummy rows. Defendants also supplied 44 and 40 caliber dummy rounds. So anybody that's seen what it looks like when you look at ammo, they're just describing what it looks like. But really important fact here is they were labeled dummy rounds. When not in use, all firearms were maintained in a locked safe in a prop truck. These are one of those facts I was talking about, that if I can find or indicate, if I have the wrongful death suit for Halyna Hutchins, if I can find that they actually weren't locked safe in a prop truck, and Hannah Gutierrez Reed said they were, well, now you're not doing your job. Now you're negligent. There were lots of opportunities for problems to happen if you weren't doing your job. Okay, that's why it's interesting to have these facts put in there while other active civil litigation is going on and potential criminal investigations are going on. Dummy and blank ammunition were not routinely locked in the safe, and there was no protocol calling for the ammunition to be locked up. So is she blaming the higher-ups for not having that protocol? Is that protocol she should have had? Whose duty is it to set up that protocol? Hannah purchased this safe for production using a production credit card and has a copy of the receipt. Only Hannah, Sarah, and props assistant Nicole Montoya, so 24, 24, and 19-year-old, knew the code to the safe, at least as far as Hannah believed. And we'll hear later that somebody else may have had the keys to the safe. The cause of the fallout between Seth and Hannah. So we've heard that Seth has worked with Hannah's dad. Seth was instrumental in getting Hannah hired on the set of Rust. I think Hannah may have thrown that in there to try to argue against nepotism, saying it wasn't just because my dad is who he is. Seth was instrumental in getting me on the set. Neither here nor there as far as this is concerned. On October 16th, my birthday, 5 days prior to the tragic shooting on the Rust set, Sarah had an accidental/negligent discharge of a weapon on set, firing a blank round at her foot. Why did Sarah have a gun? You'll hear later that Hannah was the one supposed to be handling the guns. Within 15 to 20 minutes of that accidental discharge, Baldwin's stunt double accidentally, negligently discharged a round from his weapon inside a cabin on the set nearby, as confirmed and reported by the LA Times on November 20th. So she's basically corroborating these other discharges, negligent discharges that happened on the set that we've already heard about. She is confirming it. Hannah confronted Sarah on her accidental negligent discharge, wanted to know what had happened, and indicated that they would need to tell production about it and that it could impact Sarah's ability to handle weapons on set. Seems reasonable. Can she prove she actually did this? We'll find out. But this also indicates that maybe production didn't know about the problems. Maybe Alec Baldwin didn't know about these prior discharges, which again could absolve them at least of part of the liability if they don't have this knowledge. And according to Hannah, it doesn't seem like everyone had knowledge about the accidental discharges at the time they were occurring. That's important. This led to a heated text exchange between Seth Kenney and Hannah over Sarah's accidental negligent discharge and the reporting of it. Seth took Sarah's side and essentially told Hannah to back off and that mistakes happen and that Hannah needed to remember that Sarah was her boss and not to push it. Hannah interpreted this as that Seth, who was called the armorer mentor in call sheets, wanted to sweep this security incident under the rug, and the term armorer mentor does not seem to be a position that is used or understood in the film sets generally. And then there's a text message between Seth and Hannah where he says, a mistake is when the armorer provides a gun and full load ammo to be fired with a horse in the vicinity. Will you tell production about that? We learn and move on and don't target. And don't forget, she is your boss. Don't push it. Excuse me, what mistakes do you think I'm making? Will I tell production about what? You think I'm some rat or something? You think I'm running to production to tattle? You have me effed up, Seth. If she doesn't like me when I barely said anything about it, you can come back and finish the show. I'm not going to stay here if I'm a problem. Yeah, she probably wishes she would have left at that point. Okay, around October 17th, 18th, Seth called a friend of his who he had met through Thel Reed, Officer Troy Teskey of Bullhead City, Arizona. Seth stated to Troy that he never wanted to work with Hannah again. Seth also falsely accused Hannah of using derogatory language about about Sarah 3 times on set. Now we're getting into the facts of the actual morning of the shooting, and we're going to get to find out what happens. I'm going to take a second here because I botched the intro with the sound issues. So if you don't already subscribe to our page, take a second, hit subscribe, like the video if this is the content that you like, so other people can come join us in the live. Get your questions in the comments. As soon as we make it through this long complaint, I am going to jump to questions. I'm trying to move as quickly as I can through it. I know people are saying a lot of talking. That's what lawyers do, unfortunately. All right, the morning of the tragedy and the unexplained arrival of a newly full ammo box. The morning of the tragedy, fellow Rust employees Sarah and Nicole were the first people in the prop trailer. Sarah was already in the prop safe retrieving the firearms when Hannah arrived at approximately 6:30 a.m. This was unusual as Hannah was the person who typically received the firearms from the safe herself. So again, is she blaming Sarah and Nicole? I'm not really sure because we're going to hear it sounds like Hannah thinks it was a setup and that somebody did plant these live rounds in there. Now, who it was or why they did it, that's why they brought up the fact that Seth and Hannah had butted heads prior to this, so she can kind of make it seem like Seth set her up, even though that's not what she's suing him for. She's suing him for fair trade deceptive practices, basically labeling things wrong and false advertising and strict liability based on the product. So, we'll get to that, but it's interesting because she's kind of going with the conspiracy theorist that this might have been a setup. When Hannah arrived at the prop truck that same morning, she saw a box labeled, again, dummy rounds 45 LC, completely full, which someone had placed on top of Hannah's equipment bag. Hannah had not seen a full box of dummy rounds in weeks, and nor was this full box on the equipment bag when Hannah had last been in the prop trailer. So this box of dummy rounds just appeared, again, labeled dummy rounds. Upon information and belief, the dummy rounds and live rounds came from the defendants. It's the first time we've heard the word live rounds, but I think we're getting there. All right, so Sarah has since acknowledged in a report by the LA Times. This is what I'm talking about, guys. When you give reports to the LA Times, when you go on TV and you give interviews, what you say will be used in other complaints. We do it all the time. When we have recorded statements made, under oath or not, recorded statements made, we can use them. Okay, Sarah has since acknowledged in a report by the LA Times on November 20th that a new box of presumed .45 caliber long Colt dummy rounds appeared on set that day. So it's corroborating statements from Sarah and Hannah. Hannah exclaimed words to the effect of, "What is this? We have been looking for a full box of dummy round for weeks. Where did this come from?" Now he's quoting basically his client. Again, so she's basically making statements in this complaint, still with a criminal investigation open. Sarah was the person who had been bringing all the dummy ammo boxes onto set from the defendants, but she did not respond as to where this full box had come from after Hannah made her comments. Props assistant Nicole simply giggled in response to Hannah's questions. So she may not have sued Sarah and Nicole, but it sure seems like she doesn't trust them. They may be involved, something shady going on there. You tell me, am I reading too much into this? No one in the prop truck acknowledged or claimed to be the source of the full box of .45 caliber long Colt dummy ammunition that morning. So you would have thought that Hannah would be extra suspicious about this, right? Because to me, if all this is going on and something seems shady and nobody's claiming it and we don't know where this came from, I would put that to the side and say, maybe I shouldn't use those, or maybe I should double check them and things like that. And we'll hear what she did. Hannah shook the box and heard jingling sounds, which is what a dummy round box should sound like. Again, we're putting her actions in black and white. She's going to be held to this. Is that enough? Is that her duty as the armorer dealing with ammunition, even if it's supposed to be dummy rounds and real guns on set, to just give the box a quick shake, and if it jingles, it's fine? Because obviously we're going to find out that if it's a mix of dummy rounds and live rounds, that jingle is going to sound the same. So did she have a duty to actually open it up and check all the rounds before she put it in? It was a busy morning, and Hannah was happy that they had found a full box of dummy rounds to work with. And because Sarah, as prop manager, had brought dummy boxes to the set in the past as part of her duties, Hannah didn't think any more of it at the time. But Sarah didn't claim the box, right? We already know that. So that's where the contradictions are already starting to come in when you get this complaint in black and white. Around 7:30 a.m., Hannah noted that the video camera system and app that allowed the crew to watch scenes going on in real time and store content in the cloud, Video Village, was down. As a result, Hannah was unable to view the various camera scenes and what they were filming. And this is going to become important later. As a result, Hannah was unable to view the scenes. Video Village was always supposed to be up so that Hannah, makeup, and others on set could see what when they were needed and follow what was going on with the film scenes as they were happening, for example, inside buildings. Video Village provides several apps which apparently offer secure cloud coverage and the ability for set crews to watch scenes in real time at a distance and monitor scenes. The failure of Video Village that day was very significant because no one could see inside the church at the time of the impromptu Baldwin gun scene. That's damning language to me. The impromptu Baldwin gun scene. In effect, the de facto camera security system on the Rust set was shut down that day. At approximately 10 a.m., Hannah, Sarah, and Nicole loaded Alec Baldwin's gun and 2 other guns for use in scenes that day with dummy rounds from the full dummy round box that morning in the prop truck. None of them knew where it came from, but they trusted it to load them. And how did all 3 of them load a gun? I get their multiple guns, but I think we're going to find out that maybe Hannah actually loaded them and the other 2 were standing there. For Alec Baldwin's gun, Hannah loaded 4 dummy rounds with holes in them from her pants pocket, a 5th dummy round from the box with a hole in it, and attempted to load a 6th dummy round without a hole in it from the box, but it would not go into the chamber, and she thought that the chamber might need to be cleaned. Hannah remembers shaking the 6th round to ensure to herself that it was a dummy round. Sarah and Nicole, and again, we're going to have experts talk about whether or not this is appropriate and whether or not that's how you're supposed to shake it, and whether or not it fits in the chamber like that is an indication it doesn't need to be cleaned or something else. So she's putting a lot of facts in black and white that can be picked apart. Sarah and Nicole helped load the other weapons. They were all in the prop cart. Hannah handed the gun to Alec Baldwin just after 10 a.m. And if we remember, this shooting happened after lunch, so not at 10 a.m. And had continuous possession of the gun with the 5 dummy rounds loaded in it until the set broke for lunch around 12:30. During this time, Baldwin was involved in various scenes. Hannah asked Baldwin approximately every 30 minutes when a scene cut if Baldwin wanted to give her the gun back, and he said no. Hannah also sent Nicole over to ask Baldwin if he wanted the handgun back to her for holding, but Baldwin said no, that he was okay to continue holding it. Now, again, are we putting a little bit of blame on Baldwin here, that he wasn't giving her the gun back often enough so she could check it? Was he undertaking the duty to check it if he was going to keep it for this long period of time and not let her check it every 30 minutes or when the scene cut? When the set broke for lunch at 12:30, Baldwin gave his gun back to Hannah. Hannah, Sarah, and Nicole locked the guns up in the safe in the prop truck inside gun socks. Gun socks provide an extra layer of protection to rifles and guns when traveling or in storage. The afternoon of the tragic shooting. When the three returned from lunch a little before 1:30, Sarah and Nicole pulled the guns out of the safe, and they and Hannah carried the guns and placed them back on the cart. Hannah had to step away for a brief period and asked Sarah and Nicole to watch the guns. When she came back, she noticed that the two had wandered some feet away and the guns were unattended for perhaps 5 minutes. So again, if she is saying that she knew all this was happening at the time, why didn't she stop? Stop everything, check the gun again, make sure everything was okay. Hannah remembered the chamber that she believed needed to be cleaned, and she cleaned it, and then Hannah pulled another round from the dummy box, shook it, and placed it in the chamber. Again, we're going to hear if that shaking it is good enough, I'm sure. To the best of Hannah's knowledge, the gun was now loaded with 6 dummy rounds, but she doesn't say that she checked the other rounds. She doesn't say she looked at the gun and went through all the proper safety precautions again after knowing that it was left unattended. That's a problem. Indeed, defendants as suppliers of prop ammunition to the Rust set sold, distributed, and advertised its props as dummy ammunition and not live rounds. Hannah relied upon and trusted that defendants would only supply dummy prop ammunition or blanks, and no live rounds were ever to be on set. So it's literally like Baldwin points the finger, then the next person points the finger, and the next person, and the next person, and the next person, and everybody's pointing their finger that they relied on what somebody else did. Well, where does the buck stop? Who has a duty to not rely on anybody else and to make sure that things are safe? And does that fall into paragraph 15's duty, where paragraph 14's duty, she was responsible for maintaining and managing operation of firearm-related movie props. Sounds like she's undertaking at least part of that duty to me. All right. Production was behind several hours because the camera crew had quit the night before, and this was the cause of Video Village being down. The camera crew quit, but left their equipment behind. Instead, they opted to drive the long distance again the next morning to the set to apparently get their equipment. Curiously, the long distance drive was the main reason for them quitting in the first place, as she pointed a finger at the camera crew. Sounds like she's at least putting some of the blame on them because the camera crew quit. Video Village was down, so she couldn't see what was going on. They had to make this long drive, but they said that's why they quit, was because of the long drive. It seems like she's really showing how this may be a lot of people's fault, not just one person. But maybe she's saying the buck stops with the person that provided the ammunition. Hannah brought the gun to A.D. Halls. First time we've heard his name mentioned. A lot of people have been saying maybe he's to blame. Inside the church, Hannah spun the cylinder for Halls and showed him the 6 loaded dummy rounds. Baldwin was not inside the church. So now she's saying, Halls and I looked at it together. It was dummy rounds when I gave it to him. So I don't know what happened after that. Pointing the finger at Halls, maybe. Halls then took custody of the weapon and was inside the church, sitting in a pew. There were multiple people inside the church. Production emphasized strictest COVID protocols, so less people in the church, obviously. Halls said to Hannah that he would be sitting in with the gun. The gun wasn't going to be used at all since it wasn't a scene or a rehearsal, which is also important. We talked about going rogue and how this scene wasn't necessarily in the books, and Baldwin and Halyna Hutchins maybe were working together on something kind of off to the side. Hannah told Halls to let her know if Baldwin came back so that she could come back inside the church and re-inspect the weapon and provide it to Baldwin herself, as she had done every time before on set. This is important. She is again creating a duty and saying she did something as far as these safety protocols are concerned. So if she did not, it is going to hurt. She is saying she wanted to re-inspect the weapon as she had done every time before Baldwin came on set. And maybe Halls will be able to testify to this. We'll see. And she needs these people, so maybe she doesn't want to point the finger too much at Halls, because then he could say she never said that, and she never did that. Baldwin could probably also testify to whether or not she did this every time he came on set. Her point was that if plans were to change for use of the gun to be more than just sitting in status, Hannah needed to be called back into the church. So she's saying, they needed me, they should have called me in, they never called me in, therefore whatever happened after this point, not my fault. Between Halls and the weapons producer who produced the ammo and Baldwin and Halyna Hutchins, between them, not me. I gave over custody of the gun to Halls, and That's the last I did with it. On this set, Hannah had a split role of both armor and key assistant props. She had to fulfill both roles, frequently flitting back and forth between two sets of responsibilities. Knowing that no gun scene was going on at that time, according to Halls, and with awareness of the COVID protocols and social distancing, Hannah then walked outside the church to prepare her fanny pack for scenes that afternoon to do some of her prop duties. Again, production was behind that day, and Hannah was acutely aware of the need to attend to her prop duties as well for scenes that afternoon. So they're going to keep talking about the fact that it's delayed. She was overworked and underpaid. She knew it. She felt it. She felt the pressure. She was rushing. She was doing 2 jobs. They're reiterating that throughout this complaint. Thereafter, Hannah did not see the weapon, nor did she have custody of it for approximately 15 minutes. That's when all the bad stuff happened, so her hands are clean. That's her story, and she's sticking to it. Sometime in that approximate 15-minute period, A.D. Halls gave the firearm to Alec Baldwin, calling out cold gun, which signified that the firearm was empty or contained only inert dummy ammunition. Hannah was not inside the church and out of earshot and did not hear this called out by Halls. So how does she know that? Maybe from the Alec Baldwin interview. After receipt of the firearm from A.D. Halls, Alec Baldwin had stated that he began practicing the cross draw from his shoulder holster and camera angles with Halyna Hutchins for an upcoming scene, which we know from the interview. No one from production, including Halls, told Hannah that Baldwin was back and that he was going to rehearse a gun scene inside the church. It was protocol for Halls to tell Hannah when first team, including Baldwin, was back on the film. Again, she's saying Halls broke protocol. He may not be a defendant, but she is saying that Halls broke protocol. This was not a scheduled rehearsal, and neither Halls nor anyone else called out rehearsal. Now she's blaming Halyna Hutchins and Alec Baldwin potentially. They're doing rehearsals, but nobody called it, and it wasn't supposed to be going on this way. Inside the church, as Alec Baldwin cross-drew the firearm, he stated that Halyna directed him to point the firearm at an angle that was pointed toward Halyna, which he did. As Baldwin further described, he pulled the hammer back and let it go. According to him, the gun just went off, firing what he later learned was a live round right at Halyna, fatally striking her. Had Hannah been called back in, she would have had re-inspected the gun and every round again. Yet she didn't do it. She didn't re-inspect every round every time she looked at it before, according to her, and instructed Baldwin on safe gun practices with the cross draw, as was her standard practice on set and under circumstances where, 1, Baldwin did not respond to Hannah's request on October 15th to schedule cross draw training, and 2, the gun had been out of her possession for 15 minutes. Blaming Alec Baldwin. I don't care if you didn't sue him. You're saying he did not follow the safety protocols that he should have. Hannah would never have let Baldwin point the gun directly at Halyna as part of standard safe gun practices. Apparently, no one inside the church stopped Baldwin from doing so, including A.D. Halls. So everyone in the church is at fault now. Everyone in the church should have stepped in and advised Alec Baldwin not to point the gun at Halyna Hutchins, including Alec Baldwin himself. Everybody's getting shots fired at him, in my opinion. The aftermath of the shooting. As the shot went off, Sarah, who was outside the church near Hannah and at the ammo cart, exclaimed, "What was that?" Hannah responded that she didn't know. Sarah then asked, "Was that the gun?" Hannah said it couldn't be the gun, and she believed it had to be special effects because Hannah knew in her mind the gun was loaded with dummy rounds when she handed it to Halls. Thereafter, Hannah heard shouting in her earpiece and complete commotion. Hannah went inside the church, whereupon she saw Halyna and Joel Souza laying on the ground and they were bleeding. Yet, according to Alec Baldwin, he couldn't tell if they were hurt or not. He thought they fainted. Reports from the Santa Fe Sheriff's Office reveal that there were 14 people in the church. Hannah was trying to make sense of the situation while people shouted for her to leave the church. It became apparent that a tragedy had occurred. Hannah ran outside and yelled back to Halls she needed to take custody of the weapon and inspect it. Halls brought her the weapon and Hannah inspected it, finding the spent casing. At that point, Hannah was trying to figure out if this had been a dummy round with a hot primer or possibly a live round inside the weapon. At or around 1:49, calls made to 911. Law enforcement came to the scene. Hannah told Sarah to inspect the ammo box immediately to see if there were live rounds. Sarah returned from the prop cart within minutes and said that there were other suspected live rounds. It's unclear how Sarah was able to make this determination so quickly, what her procedure was in checking the rounds, and how thoroughly she did so. So maybe she didn't just shake the box one time. And is Hannah saying Sarah had something to do with it? How could she have known so quickly there were live rounds? At some point thereafter, Sarah told Hannah that she called Seth Kenney and that he said that the live rounds were not his. Not mine. I don't know whose they are, but they're not mine. Hannah was upset, and art manager Brian led her around the building, out of view of the car, to console her. When Hannah emerged to speak to authorities, she saw that the cart had been moved about 40 feet to the other side of the church. It's unclear who moved the cart and for what reason. After law enforcement, this is law enforcement's response. After law enforcement and medics attended to the shooting victims, the sheriff then secured the scene. In doing so, they found a suspected 7 live rounds distributed inside an ammo box on the ammo cart. The live rounds had Starline brass casings with nickel primers. Remember back to Starline brass casings that we talked about in the beginning that Thel, her dad, and the defendant Kenny had used on another set for live rounds. Pictures taken from the scene by authorities on October 21st showed that other guns and the ammo box were missing from the cart. Hannah wasn't sure if someone had taken them or had taken them from the prop truck. Law enforcement did not search the prop truck until a full 6 days later on October 27th, which just doesn't make sense to me. Regarding the search of the prop truck, on behalf of production, they told the sheriffs that they would unlock the padlock placed on the truck for them. However, throughout production on the Rust set prior to the shooting, the prop truck was virtually always left unlocked and accessible to anyone. After the police had arrived on scene on the 21st, before Halyna had been pronounced deceased, Seth, again the defendant, made a call. It's unusual to use his first name, but made a call. Sometimes they use first name, sometimes they use the last. It's more proper to just use the last name throughout. Made a call to the police officer in Bullhead named Troy Teskey, which we've already heard from. During that call, just hours after Halyna had been pronounced deceased, hours before Halyna was pronounced deceased, he stated words to the effect that Hannah had messed up. He's calling Thel's good friend, Hannah's dad's good friend. So it's kind of weird that he would blame Hannah. How and why Seth came to this almost immediate conclusion that Hannah messed up and offered up unsolicited to Troy is neither understood or yet explained to be clarified. Troy felt that the call was very unusual and that Seth made one of his first calls to him right after the incident. Again, this is an officer that's friends with Hannah's dad, who's obviously taking Hannah's side. Seth repeatedly called Troy over the next 2 weeks and texted him 20 calls and texts Seth made to Troy. During one of the calls with the lead investigator, he called Troy and asked Troy if he could send some of Thel's live reloaded rounds that originally came from a known reloader who specializes in reloading rounds. Seth also texted Troy and asked if he had any live reload rounds with nickel primers and if he could use some of those. So he's trying to get some of this evidence to see if it's like what was used on the set of Rust. And it seems like there's a cover-up, there's a plot twist. He's going to try to blame somebody else. Did he set it up? Some conspiracy theories. That's what a lot of these paragraphs are about. Then there's a text message that said, yes, it's evidence in the accidental death. So he's doing this independent investigation outside of law enforcement to try to prove it ain't him. It wasn't his rounds. All right, defendants attempt to shift blame and responsibility from themselves. And again, these are more text messages. Seth Kenney telling Hannah, blame A.D. Halls, blame anyone else. He'll have your back. And basically he was saying, don't drag me into it. Don't drag my company into it. Blame other people. We don't have to read all of these because we're already 45 minutes into this video. But I do want to get to Troy would testify that Hannah never had access to the reloaded live rounds he kept in the house of Thel Reed. So again, they're going after these live rounds, who had access to them, who could have planted them. And they're definitely trying to shift this blame toward Seth Kenney. Seth Kenney trying to shift the blame back to them. But I want to get to the actual causes of action now. First, a violation of the New Mexico Unfair Trade Practices Act. Defendants engage in a course of unfair trade practices through the acts and omissions described above. Defendants acted as described above. Defendants' acts as described above constitute unfair methods of competition, and they constitute unfair or deceptive acts or practices in the conduct of commerce, both which violate New Mexico Unfair Practices Act. These acts include, but are not limited to, representation of a particular standard, that props were dummy rounds and safe and effective products for use on a movie set when in fact they were unsafe live rounds and never should have been on a movie set. Such representations were untrue, false, and misleading. Defendants provided ammunition boxes with 45 Colt dummy labels. The ammunition boxes failed to state a material fact that contents contained both dummy and live ammunition, which were deceptively sold in violation of that statute. For such actions, defendants are liable for all compensatory damages allowable by law. Okay, and we'll talk about what those are because she wasn't injured. So we can't forget that the fact that she wasn't injured. But also treble damages under this act, which means 3 times compensatory damages. So if compensatory damages are $1 million, treble damages means $3 million. Punitive damages and attorney's fees and costs. And these damages are allowable under the statute, and that's why you choose these statutes carefully, that these causes of action that you're going to file a claim like this under, because the potential damages against the defendant are at least 3 times as much as they'd be under some other cause of action. Next, creation of a dangerous condition, strict product liability. And you'll hear why they choose this one. Defendants in the business of putting prop dummy ammunition into the market. The ammunition was misrepresented and as only dummy ammunition when it contained both dummy and live ammunition. Defendants distributed boxes of ammunition purporting to contain dummy rounds. They contain a mix of dummy and live rounds. Defendant in turn failed to provide any warning as to the potentially dangerous condition that they created. Hannah and the entire Rust movie crew relied on defendants' misrepresentations that they provided only dummy ammunition. In doing so, defendants created a dangerous condition on the movie set, unbeknownst to Hannah Gutierrez Reed, which caused a foreseeable risk of injury to numerous people, okay? So it's strict liability, which means if you did this, you're liable. I don't have to prove that you were negligent. I don't have to prove you did something wrong. It's just if you mislabeled this and created this known hazard with live rounds. Everybody knows that's dangerous. It's like fireworks and other things. Guns are dangerous. And when you play that game, it's strict liability. And the risk is foreseeable. It's not unforeseeable that somebody would put this in thinking it was a dummy round and shoot it if you said it was a dummy round. For such conduct, defendants are responsible for all compensatory damages, punitive damages for being grossly negligent, reckless, or willful violations. So you'll see there's no treble damages or attorney's fees and costs here because statutorily it's not given to them like the other cause of action, but this one they get the strict liability. And they're saying they want punitive damages because this negligence rises above and beyond just simple negligence. Count 3, strict liability, false and deceptive product labels, and false and material misrepresentations. So these misrepresentations have to be material, meaning important. Not just that you said they were going to be red guns and they were blue guns. Doesn't necessarily make a difference. So again, defendants breached the implied warranty of fitness for a particular purpose since their props, though not defective, were unsuitable for the particular purpose for which they were purchased. Hannah's purpose for using dummy ammunition was to portray live ammunition without using live ammunition in movie scenes involving gunfights. These false representations caused live rounds to be introduced on set, resulting in a foreseeably catastrophic outcome and causing damages to persons on the Rust set. Again, didn't shoot her, but it caused damage to other people. And then we have breach of contract because apparently Hannah hired this company to do something else on a different movie set, paid them 10 grand. Now they're not doing it and they won't give her the money back. Breach of contract. Simple. Let's tack it on. Jury trial demand. Plaintiff demands a jury of 6. People made like that was a big deal. That's just demanding a jury trial. That's your right. They demand the following award of damages and relief. This is interesting. A judgment entered against the defendant, finding that is liable to the plaintiff, that the defendant is liable to the plaintiff. Award compensatory damages, punitive damages, treble damages, costs and expenses, including attorney's fees, award of prejudgment and post-judgment interest, and allow a trial by jury. So, in my opinion, I don't think they got into enough what the damages were specifically to Hannah Gutierrez Reed. And we've had motions to dismiss on some of our complaints that we didn't plead what the damages specifically were enough for these. So that'll be interesting to see how this continues on through litigation. This is extremely interesting to me. While, like I said, other civil and criminal investigations are going on surrounding these, how she is suing Seth Kenney and PDQ, prop, not the chicken restaurant, but the prop company. She's suing them. But to me, if I represent any of these other people, I'm saying she's firing shots at me. She's firing shots at AD Halls. She's firing shots at Sarah and Nicole. She's firing shots at production. She's firing shots at the big bosses who created this environment. She's firing shots at the cinematographer, the videographers that walked off set. And she's definitely pointing the finger at Alec Baldwin as well. She even kind of pointed the finger at Halyna Hutchins and Joel Souza for being in the church and not following safety protocols, not warning Alec Baldwin, and not calling for Hannah to come and check the gun like she did every other time. That's what she said. And all these people that she's pointing the finger at are going to be able to come and say whether or not that's actually true. Did she come check the gun every time? Fascinating stuff throughout this complaint. So hopefully you guys learned something and enjoyed kind of the breakdown and explanation, because this is literally what I do. I draft complaints for plaintiffs in cases suing defendants. So this is very interesting, and things are done with a purpose. So there's about 10 minutes left. I want to get to as many questions as I can. So I'm going to scroll through the chat now and try to pop up as many questions as I can to answer before we're done with the hour. So if you have a question, get it in the chat now. If you're not watching this live, ask your question in the comment, please. I'll try to get to it. We'll do future videos on this case and everything surrounding this Rust shooting. It is so interesting to me as a plaintiff's lawyer and a criminal defense lawyer, because there could be aspects of both in it. So make sure you comment your questions. Make sure you subscribe to our page and like the videos so you can be involved every time we talk about this Rust shooting. Okay, that was a lot. And sorry we didn't read every single word in the complaint. I think that would have bored everybody. We got people from London and California and New York City. It reminds me of, a song by Taylor Swift. Mexico City, Tennessee, Santa Barbara. All right, let's see. People calling out nepotism for the hiring. Wasn't her job to make sure everything was 100% safe. All right, talking about the salary, way too little. People thinking 19, way too young. Good question. 7K, what's the percentage of the total budget? I'm not sure. 7.5K for 14 days. All right, when you put it that way, maybe it's not so bad, but I wonder how many hours a day she was working. And with the liability, remember that. Don't just take a job for the money. Think about how this could backfire on you and work that into your price, because that's really important. All right, let's see. John Grisham. So they provided the incorrect rounds. She still should have checked, just as Baldwin should have checked. Exactly. This is kind of where does the buck stop, right? I definitely think if they provided these live rounds that she could prove that it was them, but it seems like she can't prove it because she wasn't there the last 15 minutes, and when she checked, everything was fine, right? So where does the buck stop? Is everybody's pointing the finger at someone else? Or maybe this was their strategy. Eric McDowell, finger pointing all around. Veronica thinks she needed more training. So who does that come back to? Her or whoever was supposed to be training her? So Eric was Baldwin, the film's producer. So he was one of them. He talked about his interview. Basically, he was just there for, I can't remember what he said, for like artistic creativity or something. He wasn't making the decision. He wasn't doing the training. He wasn't looking at budgets. He was just there to try to make the movie look and sound better, basically. A witty mystic. That's what I'm thinking too. If she didn't know where the dummy round box came from, should have checked all the rounds. She's admitting that she didn't even know where it came from, and everybody she asked giggled or didn't know where it came from. She gave it one shake and then loaded it. That to me, she's admitting liability. Yeah, people saying shaking the box doesn't seem bulletproof. A circle of people pointing at each other. It's like that Spider-Man meme where they're all looking at the other Spider-Man pointing the finger. Thick Lucky, best lawyer on YouTube right here. Sorry, Attorney Tom, but if you all collaborate in the future, that would be awesome. Thank you. Attorney Tom's awesome. We've actually done a podcast together. I would love to collab with him and talk through whatever with him. He's funny. He's a cool guy too. He's one of the good ones. So I'm cool with Attorney Tom. And he couldn't care less if anybody says anything about my channel. He's got like 1 million subscribers. So he's a big shot. Let's see here. Yeah, Spider-Man pointing the finger at each other. Let's see. A movie about making this movie would be awesome. I assume that's going to happen because this is pretty crazy. All right, let's see. Perimeter. Bring charges on all the crew members and see who sings. Seems like everybody's suing everybody at this point. So expat. Such a verbose narrative is that usual. The lawyer must be a hobby whodunit writer. Why is there not a clear summary of what the complaint is about or what happened? So there's a couple reasons for this. And I talked about it a little bit at the top. Usually we're a little more vague because we don't want to necessarily lock our client in because our client's not drafting the complaint. They're explaining to us and we're drafting the complaint with them. And so we leave room for their explanation, but it has to be a definite enough statement, as we talked about in the Prince Andrew case, so that the defendant knows what they're being sued for and what the facts are, at least with the defendant. But I don't usually put quotes of my client or specific things that my client did, because they're held to that. And if it changes even a little bit from how I wrote it, if I put it in my words versus the client's words, it can make them look like they're lying. So it's not always written out to this extent with this much detail. We always give enough detail so that the defendant knows what they're being sued with, but we let our client explain it in a deposition. And that deposition and the testimony at trial is the evidence, not the complaint. You don't win a case based on the complaint. But when they file a motion to dismiss and you use the four corners of the complaint, having this much detail can sometimes be good. And the judge reads it, as we know, again, from the Prince Andrew case, the judge reads it in the light most beneficial to the non-moving party. And so he reads these facts as true. And if they are true, can they prove this claim against the defendant? Answer is yes at this point. I agree. Very descriptive, not gibberish at all. I think they do a great job of explaining it. I would just be a little bit nervous if my client explained it any different. If I was the defense lawyer, I would pick it apart and say, every time you did it, every single time you checked it. Why didn't you check it here? Okay, so when this dummy round box came in, all you did was shake it. I check it every time. I double check it. I triple check it. I wanted to grab it every 30 minutes. I wanted to keep it in my control. Only I knew the code to the safe. I had all these safety protocols, but my safety protocol for a new box of dummy rounds that I had never seen before and didn't know how I got here was just to shake it, because that doesn't add up to me. All right, let's see what else we got. All right, let's see if there are any more questions. All right, Stella Ford. She's firing shots first because she knows she has responsibility. So strike first, strike hard, no mercy. Other lawsuits have already been filed, so she's not necessarily striking first. But I agree with you. Maybe she's trying to get out ahead of it. Is she not scared at all of criminal liability and them using some stuff from this case and that? I don't know. She can't. It'd be really hard for her to plead the fifth as a plaintiff in a case because she has the burden to prove these causes of action now. So when her deposition gets taken, it's going to be interesting if she pleads the fifth. Stories. If she wins this case, will it exempt her from lawsuits from the Rust shooting, or could she still get pulled into other cases involving Rust? Absolutely not. Does it exempt her from any other lawsuits? She could still get sued. She could still be liable. She can try to use this company to indemnify some of that and use some of that as her damages. that she's getting sued, having to pay somebody else, and that's compensatory damages to her that she's going to blame on them, could get really convoluted and interesting. And it's something that we'll follow and see if it happens. Cassandra Stokes, if you would have framed this complaint, would have been significantly different based on what is known. I would have probably given a little less detail. But I think it was a good complaint. I think they picked good causes of action. Again, it's New Mexico, so a little bit different laws, but you want to hook in treble damages. You want to hook in attorney's fees and costs. You want to hook in punitive damages because that gives you the most leverage against the defendant, gives you the most firepower. Dimitri Davis Boyd, not related. Can you follow up on Ahmaud Arbery? I heard some stuff's happening in that, maybe in a future video. Let's see here. So, DeAndre, what do you think is the purpose of this complaint? To get their story out? I definitely think it's to get their story out. I definitely think it's to get people talking about the fact that this isn't her fault. This is somebody else's fault. So even if she loses elsewhere, she can say, listen, maybe I had some negligence, but this never would have happened if they did not provide me with incorrectly labeled ammunition. They are the ultimate wrongdoers here and the ones to blame. All right. I think that's about all the questions specifically about this complaint. Thanks for everybody that jumped on this kind of last minute live. And if you're watching later, like I said, make sure you get your comments and questions in there. Make sure you like the video if you do like this content. Thanks for being with us. We will be going live Friday still. We have our first video tonight on the Halderson trial, giving our initial breakdown of the first part of the trial to see what you all think, what the subscribers to this channel think, if you want more on it. If you're getting enough elsewhere, don't feel bad letting me know. I don't need to dive full into it. I don't need to take on any more cases that you guys are not interested in. So let me know if you're interested in it in the comments and by liking that video and watching that video, so I can know if we need to dive headfirst into that trial. It is crazy, obviously, as a lot of these trials are these days. But thank you for listening. Thanks for being with me. Until next time.